Alô, testando o microfone. Um, dois, três, testando. Alô, teste, 1, 2, 3. Testando. Testando o microfone, 1, 2, 3. Pessoal que tá na live aí, se tiver ouvindo, dá um ok no chat aí, beleza? Obrigado. Arcano. Pessoal da live, eu tô testando esse microfone aqui. A gente vai tentar usar ele para as perguntas, tá? Se tiver funcionando, dá um ok pra gente também. Valeu.
Como assim? Aqui? Mas não chega, hein? Bom, estamos aqui se adaptando, né? Igual a gente precisa fazer. A gente está fazendo uma transmissão online que eu acho que é muito válido para a gente conseguir compartilhar com mais pessoas ainda. É até um propósito nosso. Pessoal, obrigado por ter vindo. Acho que a gente está com uma oportunidade muito bacana aqui. Vou fazer um jabazinho aqui para Invillia. Então, acho que nós somos uma empresa de transformação digital. A gente vem de times, né, de desenvolvimento. A gente ajuda na transformação digital dos nossos parceiros. Então, a gente tem bastante experiência acumulada e, óbvio, a gente aprende também com cada um que a gente entra. A gente tem novos aprendizados e ajuda a todo mundo a se desenvolver. Beleza, gente? Bacana? Okay, but we need to start talking English too, né? Right, guys? We have here Joey. Paulo, if you could introduce yourselves, be comfortable.
Okay.
Okay?
Ricardo. Olá. Boa noite. Good to see you. Good to be here. By the way, this is my first time in Araraquara, so I'm happy to be here. I've actually been close by before, but never knew about this city until recently, till just a couple of months ago. I've actually been in Sao Carlo a couple times. One of my first times in Brazil, I went to Sao Carlo and then went close by. What's the name of the city again?
Close to
Where I went whitewater rafting.
It's Brotas.
Brotas. I went to Brotas and went whitewater rafting in 2003. So that's one of my first times in Brazil, but that's not why I was there, but I experienced that. It's kind of fun, and I never knew about Araraquara, so it's good to be here. So my name's Joe Yoder, and I'm with the Refactory, and I could say a lot of things, but I'm not necessarily interested in saying a lot about who I am, other than I've been in the software industry a long time and was fortunate enough to evolve from the software architecture group in the early days with one of the Gang of Four authors, Ralph Johnson, that wrote the design patterns, and we invented the term refactoring. We worked with Martin Fowler when he wrote the book, but he didn't know the term when we actually did the first PhD with it, and so we created a company, and I've been involved with doing agile software development and different things and helping teams succeed doing this for quite some time. I've been coming to Brazil a lot. I very much like the culture and the people. So since 2002, 2003, I usually come at least once a year, almost every year. 2 years ago, I came 4 times. Last year, I came 6 times. So I'm trying to beat my record this time. This is my first time this year.
And your first carnival here, right?
Yeah, I've never been to Carnival before, but all my Brazilian friends say I must go. So this time I was doing some work in Sao Paulo. I'll be next week in Sao Paulo up and through Friday, which is March 1st, and I found out that that's Carnival. So I decided not to go home until March 4th. So I'm an agilist. I love technology, but I'm technology agnostic. But I've been doing agile and extreme programming and TDD and refactoring and clean code and patterns for a long time. Been involved through all the SOA stuff to microservices, doing a lot of work with different people. But also I just like to meet and get involved with different cultures. And by the way, I like to dance too. So I think here in Brazil, I found, it's in the blood, so it seems very natural.
Yes, that's true. Thank you, Joe. Paulo, you want to talk some word with us?
Okay. We're using this?
Okay.
No,
okay.
It's pretty strong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Boom. Oh, boom mic.
Yeah, boom mic.
Boom mic. Yeah. Not boom box.
Yeah.
Joe knows me very well, so I guess I can introduce myself in Portuguese.
Muito bom.
A gente já está colaborando em trabalhos diversos já há uns 10 anos ou mais. Enfim, eu sou de Brasília, trabalho como desenvolvedor no grupo de TI do Tribunal de Contas da União Mas eu também sou professor voluntário da Universidade de Brasília, ministro uma disciplina de arquitetura de software no programa de mestrado, que eles abriram em 2013, me convidaram, desde então eu criei a cadeira e ministro essa disciplina uma vez ao ano, né? Uma coisa que eu faço assim como voluntário, à parte. Eu também sou instrutor certificado de uma empresa chamada Architectura, que fica no Canadá, né? Eles têm treinamento de microserviço, treinamento de DevOps, um monte de coisa. Alguns dos treinamentos eu ministro. E eu tenho um laço mais forte com o Software Engineering Institute, que é um instituto de pesquisa aplicada que faz parte da Universidade Carnegie Mellon, nos Estados Unidos, né? Eu estudei na Carnegie Mellon. E aí virei pesquisador, tempo integral, depois a família voltei para o Brasil e estou em Brasília, mas eu mantive o vínculo com o que a gente chama de SEI, né, o SEI, e colaboro com eles remotamente e ocasionalmente, né? Então faço treinamentos para eles e colaboro com alguma coisa de pesquisa, mas o que eu faço no dia a dia é trabalhar como desenvolvedor, né? Até me perguntaram hoje no horário do almoço, você ainda escreve código? Eu falei, no meu dia a dia eu abro a IDE e fico lá mexendo no código. Que é o que eu gosto mais de fazer. Eu sou uma pessoa muito tímida, então sempre que eu estou assim na frente de uma galera, não é a minha zona de conforto, né? Mas eu adoro conversar tecnologia com as pessoas, né? Vários de vocês estavam hoje no nosso workshop de microserviços, né? Aquilo lá, esse tipo de coisa eu faço assim, não me cansa, né? Eu gosto muito. Obrigado pelo lanche aqui fora. O quibe estava bom, o pastel estava bom, a coxinha eu nem experimentei, porque hoje no almoço eu comia coxinha dourada de buenanada. Então agora vou ter que passar alguns meses da minha memória de paladar, para esquecer como é que é o sabor dessa, para provar uma outra, porque essa aí essa coxinha de vocês aqui é boa. E então é isso, eu trabalho hoje em dia com desenvolvimento de microserviços, trabalho com Java, mas hoje em dia eu estou criando coisa em Kotlin, com uma plataforma de containerização com Docker.
Many details.
Sim. Bom, esse sou eu trabalho no desenvolvimento de software no TCU, a gente usa desenvolvimento ágil, são equipes com sprints, etc., né? Mas é governo, então tem a forma de funcionar é diferente, né? Mas a gente tem umas práticas bem legais lá, e o pessoal que estava no workshop tem meu e-mail, né? Qualquer coisa para contato no futuro a gente mantém o bate-bola.
Muito bom, beleza. E eu sou o Aloysio, não sou nem nada perto desses caras aqui, mas estamos aí, tá? Conversando com o Joey aqui, a gente falou assim, poxa, que oportunidade que a gente está tendo aqui, né? Pessoas de alto peso aí, de conhecimento estão aqui. Falei, e aí, Joey, será que a gente não pode fazer uma conversa aqui para compartilhar o conhecimento com todo mundo da região? Ele super topou para nos ajudar aqui. E assim, eu acho que a gente pode ir num formato, numa linha bem tranquila, de se alguém quiser perguntar, né, a gente conversa, a gente vai ter pessoal também online, quiser fazer tirar alguma dúvida, ajudar a gente a desenvolver uma conversa bem bacana. Beleza? Então, sinta à vontade. You understand what I say, Joey?
A little bit.
I was talking about
Free form questions.
Yes.
freeform. Yes, that's true.
We're here for whatever you want to talk about.
Yes, we have a pretty all the knowledge here, and we should enjoy it. Okay.
Okay.
Can I ask you start question?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay, we getting back from the lunch. We are talking about this word and the changes that happens at any time. We need to adapt. So, how can we design systems thinking this changes? The word changes a lot. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So,
it's a good question, Joey.
from lunch, from what I'm remembering, what we were talking about is I've been in the Agile community, I was doing Agile-like things before they even did the Agile Manifesto. And in fact, a lot of those people came from the patterns community and the good object design, people like Kent Beck, Martin Fowler, all those types of people, Jeff Sutherland and all that, writing Scrum patterns before there was an Agile Manifesto. So when all of us and those people at the time are getting together to do the Agile thing, it wasn't meant to just that, oh, change is good, let's just do change. A lot of times people misunderstand the Agile Manifesto. So a lot of times people are blindly following Agile principles. They really look at Agile as, if you do Scrum exactly like this and have your stand-ups exactly like this, you're being Agile. But sometimes it's very rigid. And Agile was never about a process. It was really about a mindset, how we work together, and this continuously improve and continuously learn. So sometimes the other extreme is some people, so we don't want to overplan. That was a problem we had back in the 90s when a lot of these ideas were evolving. From the more what we call the traditional or the waterfall type methodology we used at that time. And on the other hand, Agile doesn't mean chaos. And so sometimes people get caught up with, oh, I'm being Agile, so I can change and do whatever I want. And break the, and it doesn't mean that you still don't plan. You can still have some upfront planning. We still have roadmaps, but it's a rough adaptive planning. And we can even still think about architecture. I mean, I'm really glad that Paulo's here because he's been involved with architecture for a while. So when I heard, when Paulo come, I wanted to make sure to invite him to participate. Because you can still be Agile, and in fact, you have a responsibility to being Agile to think about architecture. Technology decisions, architectural decisions influence our agility. And in fact, Mike Beadle, who wrote the first, was probably the second adopter of Scrum behind Jeff Sutherland, wrote the first patterns with Jeff Sutherland. He has a quote here recently, and he's one of the signatures on the Agile Manifesto. He was one of those original people that put together the Agile Manifesto. He has a quote that no Agile mindset, framework, or whether will help ensure success if you have a blatant failure towards, if you don't have good technology practices and good technology things. So, a technology excellence is a must. The people skills are important, and that's part of the Agile, but we also need to think about we not only get good people and ensure communication, but also good technologies and put things together, because our technology decisions can influence how Agile and how our business can grow and change that. But sometimes we seem to forget that. And it's not that, when you look at the Agile Manifesto, it doesn't say we encourage change. It says we embrace change, right? We accept the fact that change happens. So it's not like I'm, ooh, change, please, or hey, I just want to do whatever I want. I'm bored with this now, go do that. So now I'm being Agile. That's not what it's about. Does it add business value? What makes sense? And am I learning? Agile is about continuously learning. And if I learn a new way, then I can adapt and change because it adds value. And constantly being okay with change is what it's about. So trying to find that balance so that rough adaptive planning and doing what adds the most value for the company, not just going fast. Sometimes going fast is the wrong thing. And sometimes stopping and doing nothing is best for the business. Rather than, I can always go fast, but am I going the right direction? So, turn down chart, or how fast is our velocity, but am I doing the right thing? And so sometimes we need to stop and think a little bit. So it's balancing that, having some slack time, slow thinking with fast thinking. Daniel Kahneman has a great book that talks about that is translated in Portuguese as well. But a lot of times within the Agile mindset, we get caught up with, especially you can even think of TDD, right? Anybody here know TDD? Red, green, red, green, red, green, right? Failing test, pass, and just as fast as we can. But we forget to refactor and take our time to do things right. And so even though we're doing a lot of tasks, we're not achieving much value. And are we adding business value? So slow thinking, fast thinking is good. So Agile, a lot of times, it can save my life. I'm crossing the street and a bus is coming and I react. Fast thinking is more reactionary, my bias is the first quick thing that comes. But sometimes we still have to stop back and take a step back and make sure, are we building the right thing and adding the most value? And sometimes my complaint with sometimes with the Agile community, and I go to a lot of the conferences, including Agile Brazil a lot, is sometimes we forget about the slow thinking side of that. So how to balance that and then adapt our change based upon what adds value from that. So that's a lot of what, we didn't get time to kind of finish the conversation, but because we were finishing lunch and had to go back to work, we had to do fast thinking at that time.
Awesome. We need to talk in the microphone, right? Yes. Awesome, Joy. Thank you.
Can ask a question, we can repeat it into the mic.
Oh.
Or anyone can.
Yes, please. Anyone?
Podem fazer em português também e a gente traduz para o Joe caso precise.
Verdade. Fala em português que a gente explica o que quer dizer e tudo mais.
I would like to talk about legacy code.
Okay.
How you work to refactor a legacy code, or how you test your legacy code to, after that, of course, refactor and growing the code.
I will just repeat the question so the guys on the web could understand. So, Joey, how do you refactor the code, right? Is that the legacy code? Yes, we take a lot of legacy code. So, how do we can refactor it?
Well, there's a lot of well-known techniques that work well with legacy, with refactoring in general, and it works whether you're working with legacy code or whatever legacy means, right? So what is legacy? Is it COBOL code? Or now Java's been around a long time, maybe Java's legacy? Is it code that's been through multiple releases? Is legacy code that I wrote last month and then now it's become legacy? So, and legacy has, right or wrong, legacy like monolith gets a bad connotation sometimes. So the word legacy, I've seen some legacy code that's very nice, very well written, very clean, very easy to extend. It's factored well. It uses a lot of good design patterns and a lot of good software architecture, some of the best practices, pipes and filters, layered, maybe MVC type architecture was done well. And but part of that is there's an evolutionary process with code. So whenever I'm writing code, it's almost like you're cooking. When you're cooking, you're making a little bit of a mess. But if you don't keep it clean, pretty soon your kitchen gets so bad that you can't clean anymore. So same way with our code. So one of the things I like to do in the code is what Dick Gabriel talks about is keeping, he actually did Worse is Better paper. I don't know if you've ever read the Worse is Better paper, but if you Google it, it's really the first argument towards open source that was done a long time ago. And he talks about making your code more habitable. So if we have to live in it, I have to make it good enough so that I can keep it clean enough so that we can keep adding features and sustain our development in the long run. Now, sometimes, if not, you could have problems with what Ward Cunningham coined as technical debt. And the technical debt can get so bad where you can no longer evolve your system. And then your legacy code becomes what I'm best known for. I didn't talk early because I didn't get into a lot of details with that, but big balls of mud. And what causes, we published a paper about 20 years ago, the most successful architecture to date at that time was big balls of mud. Why is that? And it still is today. There's still a lot of that going on today. But if it reaches a point, it can really start hurting your business. And most of those are usually called, legacy gets that term, it's automatically that, though it's not always that. So what are good strategies that you do? First of all is we have to make a professional commitment that we're software professionals and we have a responsibility, just like a doctor needs to wash their hands before they work on a patient. They didn't used to do that, and then many patients died. Once they learned they did that the mortality rate went from like 20% down to less than 2%, something as simple as that. And we find out, fortunately with a lot of tools, that if we do a lot of these practices with the team, but we have to have a commitment. Do we value the code? So if we have a ball of mud, there are a lot of mud busting type patterns that you can do to sustain your architecture and keep it from getting worse. I would definitely point to Michael Feather's Working Effectively with Legacy Code. It talks about finding design seams, places of adding, splitting it up. Also, there is things called sprout class and sprout method. Rather than adding to the legacy and making it worse, you always add to it with something clean and make it more testable. So adding a lot of tests and slowly adding more tests. And by the way, there's 2 safe refactorings that people always can do, but they don't feel they can do safely. But you can always do 2 refactorings safely. And we just went over this here with Invillia earlier this week. But that's rename method, rename variable, and extract method. So if I have a long, ugly method, and every time I get a new business rule, I just add a new parameter and add another case statement, it becomes quite messy. Well, it's easy to, at any time, if I see a long method and I see a commented piece of code, an area that's requiring a comment, I can extract method. I never break anything. So that's always a safe way of refactoring a legacy system or any system.
And the IDs do that for you.
And the nice thing is, yeah, good point. The IDEs make it so I do Control-Alt-M for move method, or Shift F6, or right-click, extract method, and what used to take me 10 to 15 minutes happens within a matter of seconds. And those, even if I don't have tests, are safe. Now, the more complicated refactorings, you have to make sure you have tests to ensure that and validate that what you didn't break. So if you're moving a method or creating a new hierarchy and splitting your code apart and to do services, for example, you can have other challenges. I don't know if you have other things that you think of on steps on refactoring.
So briefly, on top of what Joe said, it's important to measure, right?
You employ some tools, automatic tools, like you mentioned that.
Yeah. I missed a few, but good point.
If you have Sonar Cube,
right,
and here's what happens. You have legacy code. That's typically code that was written a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes code that was written before you started measuring quality of code using Sonar Cube or alike. You get a new project. You run the Sonar Cube analysis and it says it has 20 issues. And then you get an old piece of old application or old library. You run the Sonar Cube analysis and it says, oh, you have 2,000 issues. What do?
Yeah.
You don't have time to clean it up. So to try to isolate, cordon them so
right,
you don't add to this number of issues, so don't make it worse, right?
That's what we call the Boy Scout model.
And then also the Boy Scout. So every time you're going to touch it, oh, I have to do maintenance there, because legacy code to us is, we actually discussed this definition back at work, is library or a microservice or an application that is not evolving anymore. Okay, but it's not decommissioned yet, so it's still there. But every once in a while you need to touch it, do some maintenance, fix a bug or something. So and then you do the Boy Scout thing. You do what you have to do and try to clean up a little. Add a JUnit text. Right. Rename some variables. Extract some methods from a long method.
In fact, when you're fixing bugs, those are one of the times I look at great opportunities. You're in there, you see some little, it's almost like if I'm at a campground, and that's why we call it the Boy Scout model. I always make sure to clean up my area of the campground, and if I see a little bit of other trash that somebody threw there, it really takes no extra effort to go ahead and clean that up at the time. So a lot of baby steps, a lot of small things, and if you do that over an amount of time, it really goes a long ways, especially if it's a big ball of mud. The legacy is many millions of lines of code, which I've seen. I mean, one of the worst I've seen is a single C++ class that was 1 million lines of code. Yeah, imagine that. A single, and it was from a very famous Silicon Valley company that probably software most of you have used. PayPal. Right? So they were forced to refactor it after a while. And they brought me in, and they were looking at consulting with me and asked me how they should refactor that. And I said, very carefully. And that's because it was, I mean, imagine that. But this was so core to their business. All their fast transactions and everything went through this. And if you messed up in this thing, it would bring their business down, and they would lose millions of dollars a day. on this thing. So it was very key to their business. But ultimately, even opening the editor on it and stuff like that was getting difficult. They were forced to do that, and it wasn't because they were stupid. They had a lot of smart people, but they're always bringing new people in, and maybe they don't understand things. They had the problem of fast-growing business. That's a good problem to have. But if you don't take time to refactor and keep that clean and put it back in, so I'm the new guy, and I have to add a feature like you did. You're on holiday or move to another company, but don't break it, Joe. If you break it, you're fired. So what do is I copy what you did, put my name on it. Now I've marked it, it's mine, I own it. But I didn't mess with your stuff, and I hack it and do whatever it takes to make it work, right, and pass the test. Well, that becomes like a cancer in the code. So if I'm not careful and we don't refactor that, what we learned about that back in, it can become a problem. But there are a lot of little steps that you can take that go a long way into doing that.
Anyone here is a Boy Scout?
Running out of Boy Scouts.
So something that Paulo said that's very important is if you run the sonar and you see a big thing, you don't try to do it all. You try to find low-hanging fruit.
And there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and other things, especially only if it's not changing. Forget about it.
You don't need to refactor. It's not I'm trying to impress you. It's not like a research or an academic thing. It still has. We're working in the business. We have to still add business value. So anytime we have to change it, and from there we can take a lot of small steps. And in fact, we even have we have a paper on some tool and stuff that we do, and they do a lot at TSU. It's called continuous inspection. So you can add to your ID ways of, even while you write code, if the team doesn't value and clean code and believe in that, it's not going to get better. But if you do value it, then you can start picking a subset of Sonar stuff that adds value and other architectural rules. And even as you're writing and checking the code in, you get that instant feedback of what's going on, and so you can measure it. If you Google, and you'll find our continuous inspection stuff, but Paulo's done a lot of work on that, by the way.
Awesome, guys. It's a lean way to improve, right? Ok. Alguém tem mais alguma pergunta? Cadu?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
To fly. Shy or fly.
You talked about TDD. I don't remember if you read the text about TDD that DHH wrote about TDD is dead.
TDD is dead. Yes, I am.
Long-lived testing.
Yes.
I don't like it.
Okay.
Because I like the idea of TDD, of
Yes.
designing class, and I want to know what you think about that text.
Okay.
Is TDD dead? Yeah. What do I? Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously I've heard a lot about that, and so once again, I evolved back from in the 90s. I was doing extreme programming, and TDD came from extreme programming. So not only pair programming, but trying to understand what the customer really needed. That's where a lot of these agile principles came from, and get the feedback, but write tests and acceptance tests as part of that, and being short sprints and getting that feedback. And TDD evolved from a lot of that. And at the core of TDD is we design things, we let the test help us design our classes. And then we make the test pass, but we have to refactor to keep the design clean as we go. So that's the core. It's a pretty simple, but it's very core. A lot of people miss the refactor part, and that's when you might get TDD dead. I think the reason that TDD gets a bad rap sometimes, just like Scrum gets a bad rap, or anything gets a bad rap, people learn some early things about it. They've got their blinders on. They learn it by the book, and then they forget to kind of do what adds the most value. So, okay, is TDD just for every little method I write a test? And boy, I'm writing a lot of tests. And so, for example, I worked for one company that was doing, they had to have a lot of tests, and this was a large healthcare company, and they were software. We had 4 Scrum teams in the U.S., 1 in China, 1 in India, and on 2-week sprints. And we had to have 85% coverage before you checked your code in. So what kind of tests do you think the developers were writing with 85% coverage required? What would you guess? Yeah, they were writing unit tests, but the tests were just really giving you coverage. So I can generate tests automatically. You probably could too, right? To give you 100% coverage, but they weren't good tests. So if people have their blinders on and they're not, it should be focused around the business value and business scenarios and write good tests, acceptance tests around that, rather than just blindly trying to test a lot of getters and setters or other types of methods just to show that I've invoked it. Because if it's not around business value, I can give you 100% coverage. I'd rather have really good tests and 25% coverage than 100% coverage and not so good tests. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against coverage, but if you have good tests, then we can worry about coverage. But you know, you kind of have to put both together. So is TDD dead? I know many people that still use TDD successfully, so I say no, it's not dead. Also, I don't know, have you heard of mob programming? Anybody here heard of mob programming? It's a very, it's I won't say fast growing, but it's a growing thing, but it's like XP up to the team. And they use TDD a lot as part of it. They even have their own conferences now that some Woody Zoll put out. If you Google mob programming, it's mobprogramming.org. You can go to it. But one of their core principles, and they're releasing continuously every day doing TDD, but the whole team is constantly working together, rotating pairs and doing strong pairing with that. But they're driven by the tests a lot in general, or most mob teams are. It's up to the mob team to decide. But some of the originators, like Woody's team in San Diego when they did it originally, made TDD part of that. So I don't look at TDD as bad. TDD, the problem is if people just are blindly saying, I got to do all these stupid tests or whatever. No, you need to, tests are important and have tests that add value. And then it's just like I learn anything. You learn it by the book, so you blindly follow it at first, but then you have to step back and make it part of what's best for me and the way of my team and what adds value to my team. So do I write the test first or not? Uncle Bob would say, oh, you have to, or you're not doing TDD. Yeah, that's test first development. Kent Beck even talks about with TDD where it kind of came from originally is some of these ideas evolved where we're thinking about how to validate the component with XP. And so whether you write the test first or not, do what adds the most value. So I call pragmatic TDD, more of a practical approach, the main thing is to write a lot of tests as you go, but write good tests, whatever those may be.
So, yeah. Anything to add, I was just remember yesterday I was at work around 5 p.m. waiting for the time to go to the airport to take the flight to come here. And so I work right next to this guy. He's a good friend, old-timer like me, and he's working on a microservice that's sort of mission critical because it does JWT authentication. It's used by virtually all microservices around, or front ends and stuff. And he did a major refactoring. He actually discussed it briefly, and he called me, hey, take a look. And then he does like a git status, and it was showing like 60 different classes that many added, many changed. So a lot of stuff. He touched a lot of stuff locally. And then I said, well, take a deep breath and push to master and merge. And he said, no, I'm good, because he has like 90% almost. It's Kotlin, so there's mess up with the code coverage measure, but he has very good coverage for tests. So lots of extensive unit testing and integration testing. So he was, oh no, I'm good. My tests are all passing. It's green all the way. And it was just showing out that they did a lot of refactoring. But that peace of mind that we have today of pushing code to the repository because of tests, that's priceless. So yes. I'm older than anyone here. I'll tell you this. When I started with software, we didn't have that peace of mind. When we finished changing code, and so you would test manually, and it's interesting that after JUnit came up, and it was Kent Beck and Eric Gumma, they came up with the idea of JUnit on a flight, on a piece of paper.
No. It actually came from, it was SUnit originally, before Eric Gumma. JUnit came after that. So it was in Smalltalk, and it was done with Ward and stuff, with the SUnit before.
How did we would test software? Well, we would run it and test it like the end user, right? And that was painful, and every time you would change the software, you had to test it all the way again. And it's interesting, I saw a talk by Kent Beck at Java 1,
once, and that was when JUnit 3 was released. I don't remember exactly, a long time ago. And he was saying, I mean, it was him and someone else, they were saying that before JUnit, I mean, the similar tools that
XUnit, you can say.
XUnit
Okay.
came along, it was the age of darkness, because we had a painful QA for software, and after it, it was the age of the paradox. Why paradox? Because it's so powerful, so simple, and yet not many people use it. So for a long while in industry, everybody, I mean, we knew about the importance, we knew how simple it was, and then we would not create that good test coverage, right? I see
once
that
again,
gradually it's been, has improved.
One thing I want to at least challenge you on that, which I think is okay, is it's not about coverage, once again. It's about having good tests around the business scenarios. And coverage is a secondary thing. And so to me, if I have good tests around the business scenarios, I have confidence. So one of the things I really liked about the XUnit
stuff done in Smalltalk, and then they had the JUnit and all the other. But it was, we're now going to even make, us as developers are now responsible for validating our system rather than doing work and throwing it over the wall to QA. So that was kind of a big change from that. And in fact, one thing is, I came from manufacturing QA even before you were in the software world, and the manufacturing in QA, quality was built in all the way through the process. And in fact, that's one thing I've been talking about recently, is being agile at quality, is we need that QA needs to be involved in other quality aspects, not only the developers, but looking at certain other, you're familiar with the SEI, needs to be kind of built in as you go. And
outsourcing, and they are writing code, and they push the code, and there are tests, and we don't have time to do code review. So, like in a pragmatic sense of it, all we can rely on is SonarQube, and SonarQube gives me test coverage. That I know it's not ideal, but that's the measure we have. But ideally, we would take a look. Hey, is this a good test? Are you covering all the bases, not just going through all the statements?
Right, but one thing we found out, and that's why I shared the story I had, is I can give you 100% test coverage, but they're not. But it's just invoking methods on that. I can generate, if that's what you. So if you reward developers based upon coverage, they'll give it to you. If we're good at what are you going to reward me for? Our lines of that business value really works. To me, that's one of the real key things of that. So that's where TDD has a problem, is that people are just focused on these, the numbers can be deceptive. So yeah, we could easily give 85 or 90 or 100% coverage if you want, but that doesn't validate the software system is working properly. I want confidence that it's really meeting the business value and is doing what we expect with it. So having good tests is what's key, and then you will be successful with TDD. But unit tests aren't enough. In addition to unit tests, you still need integration tests. You might have some smoke tests. If you're doing microservices in your pipeline, you better include some code smell checks as well with Sonar that can block if there's serious problems. But also certain tests should block as well.
And load tests?
Yeah, load tests, different quality tests as well. And so that way we build it in, and that's kind of that being agile at quality kind of idea.
It's amazing. It's like the agile is dead. It's the same thing. It's a mindset. We need to have it. Alguma mais pergunta aí? Teve algum problema aqui de som? Como é que é?
Então, eu acredito que algum dos microfones
Acabou a bateria? Pode ser que precisa de bateria. Querem fazer alguma pergunta? E aí? Quer fazer? Pode fazer.
Okay. Why is it so hard to work with TDD in real life? At work, I mean, at least for me, I've never worked with TDD on my job, and I don't know anyone who did. So why it's so hard?
Okay, the question is why it's so hard to work in projects with TDD, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's hard. I think it's a mindset. It's a mindset. Our people, you have to be committed to it. So basically, I did, with Invillia, we had a team of people, we were doing some TDD stuff. Within a couple of hours, I taught the principles of TDD. I think what's hard about TDD is being vigilant about it and being committed to writing the test and not getting sloppy, and don't let the whether it's the PO or the Agile Master or the project manager or whoever push me to cheat my professional responsibility. So sometimes we get caught up with thinking, oh, are these tests not adding value? Doing TDD by itself is simple, and especially as Paulo, once we got the frameworks. But it took a lot. It is still, a lot of people don't do it, but it's definitely growing. One thing I have to say that I'm very happy about the Agile movement that happened, especially from the late 90s, early 2000s to even today, is they did enforce a lot more testing and proving that what we meets the customer expectations. And there's been more emphasis. Like refactoring, which we were part of before. I was with the group that invented the term, did the first commercial tools, and the first, we invented the term and did the first PhDs on it and all that. And part of refactoring is you can't safely refactor unless you have good tests. So testing was a key premise of refactoring long before they were doing extreme programming or TDD or the Agile movement. But Agile movement made it okay. Now it's acceptable as part of, including it as part of that. They know the importance of doing that. So doing TDD to me isn't hard. I think that sometimes people might have barriers like, is this a waste of time? Why should I be writing all these stupid unit tests? Or, do they really add value? Or we get so busy, I'll test it tomorrow. That's why some people really like TFD, test first development with TDD, because if I don't write the test first, the tendency is it never gets written. So that's why sometimes the good premise of, but as long as you write good tests, I don't care whether they're written first or not. Mainly is have a lot of good business value tests, and that gives me confidence that what I'm building is what's worthy the people.
It's like saying wash their hands. It's difficult, right?
Yeah.
I think this is the main idea of the DHA. Don't matter if you write the test first or after.
Yeah.
It matters that you write tests.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. And that's what me and Rebecca Worthbrock put together. We've been put together and pushing ideas of more of a pragmatic test-driven development. As long as you write a lot of tests, whether it's a chicken or egg, whether the test comes first or not, the chicken or the egg, right? We don't care. As long, for some companies, if they just start writing a lot of tests, I'm happy. They've already won big, even if they write the test second. But doing TDD, even by the book, it's pretty simple. You write a failing test, you write some code that works the least amount of code it takes to pass that test. Then you write another failing test. Oh, and don't forget to refactor. As part of that process. Red, green, refactor, red, green, refactor. Sometimes there's no refactoring to be done, but if you're in the middle of adding a new feature and you see duplication or a wrong method, you can do a lot of safe refactors very quickly to get there.
Eu vou fazer uma pergunta aqui da internet e depois a gente já faz a sua pergunta, tá bom? Então, essa pergunta aqui, Gabriel Araújo está perguntando. Então,
Somebody from online?
Online, yes. Suppose that I'm working on a file and I identify a potential refactor on it that could be replicated in other similar files. Which would be the best? To refactor all the files to keep a consistent code base, or just the file that is needed to be changed? No, in this refactor. So,
can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, when we are working and we come in a situation that
Source file.
Yes, in a source file that we identify that need to be the same refactoring could be used in another source files.
Okay.
So it's better to refactor all the files or just in the one that you are working?
Well, I know how I would do it.
Yeah, I know how I've been done for about 20 years.
Yeah.
I actually worked in a group where one of the responsibilities was to identify smells, and then we would go about refactoring, fixing the smells across the board. So what we have learned with the experience is, if you have the time, right, you have to clean the house, you do as much cleaning as you can. So the source file you're touching, a good Boy Scout would fix it, right?
So fix that file first.
That file first.
And prove that it works.
Yes. And then if you have time, you go and clean at other places. But, Gabriel, I'll tell you this. You have to be very careful when you touch other people's code. And because if you break anything, just for a refactoring, you're not improving, you're not fixing a bug, you're not adding a feature, right? Something that probably was not in the backlog. If it's something you're doing like you're trying to do the right thing, but if you mess up somehow, people are going to point fingers at you, and you won't be allowed to do that again. So if you want to, I would scale it up and say, oh, look, this is a good opportunity. How about we do this across the board? But in practice, it's like, people are going to add that as a to-do, and a to-do in the code. When is it done? Yeah. So,
right, and so you end up with a lot of to-dos. I mean, and I kind of follow a similar philosophy. And I always say, a lot of times the answer is, it depends. And if I have good tests, whatever that means for good tests, and obviously you should do your own first to validate it. Then if you can validate the other, now if you in your organization, if the culture in your organization, the code ownership is shared, it's not like us and them and all that, and you can feel confident that you haven't broken things, then you can push it out. Otherwise you might communicate to the other teams to do that refactoring as well. But once again, it may or may not get done. But a lot of the culture, even with a lot of the agile culture, and when you look at with extreme programming, for example, extreme programming was, we don't have code ownership anymore. It's our code, not my code. This is my part and that's your part. This is ours. In fact, sometimes I'm going to be rotated to working on that part of the code, and you're going to be rotated to this part. But there is an important thing. If I break it, I fix it. So if I do the refactoring of that other, I'm also taking on the responsibility to make sure it works before it goes out, and if there's a problem, I either have to take care of either fixing it or putting it back to the way that it was.
So just to give an example, a while ago, about 8 years ago, we created a SonarQube custom issue program that would identify a problem with code, which was a vulnerability to SQL injection on Hibernate queries, or statements that it would run using Hibernate. So we identified that all across the board in our code base. We fixed whatever was projects that we owned, our team, that's what I'm saying. And then we actually discussed, should we go around fixing everybody's code to remove that vulnerability? So we decided, okay, well, this is kind of critical.
Yeah.
It's a security vulnerability.
Yeah.
Well, here's what we did. We put together a wiki page with very clear instructions on how to fix it, with different scenarios, with code snippets. And it was mostly copy and paste for most people, very simple way. And then we sent the set of instructions around, and a long list of all the issues, saying this is the project, and this is the source file, this is the line number where you have that issue, and here's where you have to apply the refactoring. And what did we do? We said, okay, so this is now known. If you just do that, what happens? Nothing. So what we had to do, we talked to upper management. So the managers of the different development teams were engaged in fixing that. So we established a monthly kind of checkup, and we would do with the SonarQube analysis, automation is key, that kind of scenario. So we would get the measures, and every month we would generate that list, and we would say, oh, there were like 20 teams, and team A, B, and C they've done all the refactorings that they had to. Teams D, E, and F, they still have some. Team A, J, H, I, and J, they're working on it. So the list was public. Everybody could see everybody's list. And then gradually, the teams were adding those things to their sprints and backlogs. So eventually it got done, but it had to go through this kind of showing everybody, hey, this is the dirty laundry that we have to do, the laundry. So
and the consequences if we don't do it, and then getting management to commit and making it a priority and allowing you the resources and time. You know, I mean, even one of the companies that I'm working with in Invillia with here right now, they've got a commitment on some things that they're doing in the upcoming year, and that's an upper level management's made that same commitment as they're moving, you know, evolving the microservices. It's very important. It's key to the business.
Okay.
Okay, Gabriel.
We have a special question here.
Oh.
The CEO from Invillia
Oh.
are asking, where is it? Oh. Many companies are trying to expose their legacy system by APIs. And now we have a microservice architecture in a fashion moment. And people strongly believe that is the solution for all the integration issues, making microservices, right? So what are your main recommendations about this approach?
Okay. Well, we both have a lot of strong opinions about this. First of all, microservices is an architectural style. And there's different trade-offs. Sometimes you want to do, before we had microservices, we didn't have the word monolith. We didn't even say it's a monolith architecture. But we still had architectural styles. We had things like pipes and filters, whether it was MVC, whether you had a layered architecture, breaking out good components and applying good design. And you can expose API even doing that type of stuff. Now, as your company's growing rapidly and going through, especially if you have a hyper growth, like Netflix had, for example, PagSeguro here in Brazil as well. In order to sustain that, breaking out, using microservices really help with that. But it's not a silver bullet. It's an architectural style and a decision you can make on doing some design things that can give you a big win. But it also has challenges. We were talking all day with some of the teams here about that, is the technical challenges, because now we're building a distributed system. So we have all the problems with the distributed system. So you have to find out what has value. If your code's not growing rapidly and not changing a lot, you can still expose API without making microservices. But if you are your business is changing a lot, a good problem to have, right? We would all like to have that problem. And now we grow. We went from 20-some teams to 100-some teams, you know, and good problem to have once again. But now it's much harder to have all that happening in the monolith. So that's where the microservices architectural style can give you a lot of benefits. Paulo has a lot of experience on this as well, so I don't want to say much more rather than let Paulo share some of that. But that's kind of a core thing that I think of that.
Yeah, so he or she is right. He is right.
Is this in Lisbon?
Yes.
Okay, hola. I'll be there in May, I think. So maybe we will visit.
Raposa. Renato Bouza. Renato Bouza is right. APIs are essential to the success of many organizations. So there's a lot of effort in exposing good APIs that can generate business to organization. But the thing with APIs is what's behind is not seen by the client. So sometimes there's this nice API, I'm going to interact with the Flickr API and upload photos, etc. You have no idea what's the design behind it, right? But from a business perspective, you need to think carefully about that API, created following standardization, good practices, right? Good documentation. It's easy to use. You have like a developer's description of how to use the API very clearly.
That's a very good point that you're making here. It's not so much the technology behind it, whether it's a microservice or a monolith, but it's the API well written and stable.
And in fact, this importance of the API, like 5-10 years ago, spawned a whole new set of tools that it's called API management tools that help with it. And today in the microservice workshop, microservice design, we actually explored one of these kind of tools that help with APIs that can help you to expose nice APIs on the benefit of clients, and then can apply whatever transformations are required to interact with whatever you have behind. Nice microservices, monoliths, soap services, God forbid. So what kind of tool was that? Anyone in the workshop remember that? That we talked about? To deal with the APIs? Yeah, that was after lunch. The API gateway, right? Remember we talked about the API gateway?
It's a pattern.
Yeah, it's a pattern. It's kind of middleware that you can have in the picture that would help with APIs. So, but ideally, you're gonna have a nice API, and then what's behind has good design, so you can have good performance. You don't suffer with availability, reliability, etc.
So really, when I look at microservices, it depends, and even Chris Richardson, who just recently released a book here on microservices, you can go to microservices.io, but he even talks about one of his first patterns is whether you do a monolith or not. Sometimes you might want, there's nothing wrong with doing it. If the code isn't too big and it's not changing a lot, starting off, we're doing a lean startup, I'd probably start with a monolith. Because trying to do microservices and build, there's a lot of overhead and distributed system. If there's 2 of us, what do? 2 microservices? If there's 5, do we have 5? Or, I mean, how do you what's going on? If we only have 10,000 lines of code or 50,000, should I have use microservices for that? Not necessarily. But if what's behind it, if that starts growing rapidly and you have a huge growth of your business with the business requirements changing a lot, that's where the teams are growing rapidly as well. That's where the microservices architectural style can help out a lot.
Okay. Some question?
You know me?
Yes.
So, I'm sorry if it might sound a silly question, but because I'm newbie in the IT area, I have been working as a junior developer for nearly 3 years now.
Okay.
I'd like to know about your opinion. In your opinion, what are the skills that a good developer needs to have in order to be good? I mean, if you have to hire someone, what skills would you try to look for in this person in order to see if that person, that developer, was good or not?
Okay.
Let me repeat this question. So, what is the best skills to a developer to have?
Okay. I'll let you go first.
And actually, I'm going to give you the quote for that slide.
Okay, great. Awesome.
Want clean code, hire developer with TOC. OCD.
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 Okay, thank you. Yeah. Okay. So, and I like that. I guess one thing I look at, definitely, are you committed to, those issues are good, clean code and stuff like that. But what I look at more important is, are you willing to learn and adapt? Are you willing to challenge yourself and try to improve? How are your communication skills? Do you work well with others? Are you open-minded? Things like that. But also, you have to look at the technical skills some too, and that's important as well. And so, I look at how do you think. So it's not it's not like do you solve this problem perfectly, but if I can see that you do have good problem-solving skills. So maybe I even give you kind of a question or a problem that maybe you don't solve right, but but I can see you got good problem-solving skills for trying to figure out what that solution is. But also willing to learn and kind of adapt with that. But yeah, I mean, I might look at. There's nothing wrong with. I know some people that if they're going for a job interview and now you want me to write and I'm supposed to be writing code and I don't want to write code. Well, wait, why couldn't I do an exercise where a little bit of code is written or something like that, or showing stuff you have?
Joke apart, when oftentimes I'm in the position of hiring, interviewing candidates for a coding internship position. And so I ask about technical skills. Have you learned, did you have this class, did you have this other class? So we have like questions, we look at code, but here's a question that I ask. Have you ever written a piece of code outside school projects? Something maybe to automate your uncle's bakery, or something like video game, or something that you did for yourself, for fun. And if the person says, oh yes, I did this, I did that, something else, so you know that person likes the job because he does that, and so it's something that he has pleasure at. Michael Jackson, not the singer.
No, but the software guy. the old dude from the UK.
Yes.
It's a famous software. He did problem frames.
So
he did a book on problem frame software.
And his problem frames book, he's much
I met him, by the way, in Tokyo.
And his son is also big in software. He's a professor at Harvard, I think. In his book, Michael Jackson talks about something interesting, and I read that when I was 30-some, and then I thought, oh, this is true. If you were a coder, this is one of the very few professions, technical professions, where you can work 10, 11, 13 hours, and you don't even notice time is passing.
You get so obsessed.
Yes.
That's the OCD.
Exactly. So you have long hours, right? Which is not good. I'm not saying this is good, but
we can all of a sudden we get obsessed with solving the problem. Right. But it's so important that we lose track of time.
Yeah, it's like you're solving a puzzle.
Yeah.
And so you build again.
You get excited about it.
And you get excited. You see things working, and it's one of the few professions where you work into the night and you don't even notice it. Right? Professions.
And you're happy when you're done. It's like, wow.
Exactly. So you do that sometimes, and people don't even ask, your manager didn't ask, and you just do it, right? So if you have someone who has that passion, right, that's an important skill. Yeah. And one thing that Joe mentioned, that is what I call technical curiosity. You are willing to learn new technologies, because in this field, the good news is that your job is always changing. Every week you get a newsletter saying there's a new programming language, or a new tool, a new infrastructure kind of tool, a new technique, something new. So the way you do software today is very different from the way you were doing it a year ago. So it's always changed. That's the good news. The bad news, though, is that every week there's a new programming language, a new technique, and it's very hard to catch up. Right. So they're the two sides, right?
It's a double-edged sword.
If you have been around a while, you can spot. If you go to an organization where you have like older people, etc., it's easy to spot people who kind of were left behind. It's hard to keep this flame of technical curiosity, so that you're looking into new things, and you want to learn new things, you want to talk to people about new things. And I don't know if it was a mandate, but just the fact that you guys are all here, I can say that you probably have that spark of technical curiosity. So that's a good skill to have.
Yes, and one thing I like to look at too is also, I like to ask the question when I'm talking with people. Most of the time, I learn more from mistakes I made than if I already knew the answer. Obviously, I didn't learn anything. So I like to ask people what were some problems or mistakes they went through and how they dealt with it. And if they don't have an answer, that worries me. from a perspective, because we all, we all go through many ups and downs, but it's how we deal with some of the issues and the technical difficulties. But when you think of improvement as well, when I think of a guitar player or a master chef, a musician, all that, they're constantly experimenting, trying new things. And so having those types of values to me are key for anything in life that I do, no matter what it is, whether it's software or whether it's, maybe sports passion I have or anything that I might want to do is from that. So I try to assess that as well.
Okay, very nice. We have another question from Lisbon.
Okay.
Mateus Mendes. It's asking, with all these automated tests, where do the QA role fits?
Okay. And by the way, I think the QA role fits early and often with that. And actually, there's a good paper that I from an Agile Experience Report that I just shared with some of your teams yesterday, which I'm hoping to make sure to get to some of the QAs there. But it talks about tearing down the walls, and it was an organization that evolved to XP, TDD, and Scrum, and the QA had to figure out how did they fit in, because they had all kinds of training program on what the developers do and how to be a Scrum Master and how to be a certified developer, or all these other types of roles with that. But there was really no kind of formal training or things what the QA did. So they had to kind of feel their way. And so they kind of flattened out QA, and it kind of embedded in as part of the whole organization. And Stephanie was her name, and she paired up with, she started joining in different teams and being part of the process all through, and even kind of pairing up, not writing code with them, but looking at their tests and helping them write better unit tests. And with those automations. And she found an interesting thing when that happened. She found that 60% of the tests that she was writing was the exact same tests that the developers were writing. So now, rather than duplicating of effort, she didn't have to do that. She could help validate those automated tests and then spend her QA time on even writing other better tests. It gave her a little more slack time. And so that's why one thing that I've really been focused on with some colleagues of mine is talking about being agile at quality. Make quality all the way through. So even in the early roadmap, the QA and architects and other people can look at, are there important considerations that are risky to our business, and we should where in the roadmap should we look at this? And if the QA is part of the process throughout, they can be more proactive as that, rather than, unfortunately, most QAs are at the end of the process, and it's what we used to call in manufacturing QC, QC, quality control. So it's more like just protecting at the end, which you still have to have. And so QA can still play part of that role, but QA can also be more proactive for helping build quality in, which might even include building quality tasks as part of the process with that. And they can help with the automated tests as well. And we still need to write some of the other types of tests, such as integration tests. There might be some
Stress tests.
Yeah, stress tests. Thank you. Stress tests, different load tests. You might also have some smoke tests, so we can get some quick tests to make sure, but it's got to test the overall thing with that.
Yeah. Well, just on top of that, one thing that I like when we have QA folks, they can help to populate your test database. That's a nice job. They can do to help a lot. So if you can, if you're the developer, you're creating your own tests, right? Automated tests. But if you team up with the QA, your automated tests will be better.
Yeah.
Right? And still, you want QA to help, because your automated tests don't prove that you're bug free. They actually find bugs, right? But if there are no issues, that doesn't mean you're bug free.
No, it takes a lot to really validate that. And in fact, one of our other patterns on being agile at quality we talk about is shadow the quality expert. So QA can also help spread quality knowledge. Most QA people are very good at validating and finding problems that sometimes people that aren't thinking about how to break systems. They're really good at, sometimes it's like, ooh, they're the enemy, QA, the us and them. You know, they're causing pain for me, right? But they're really not. They should be my friend and we're working together. I want them to help me find problems before it goes out into production. And so they can even help me even understand testing better or how to validate the system. And I know as a developer, if there's certain qualities that are important and there's a way to validate that, it's good for me to understand that because then I can develop to help build that in as we go.
And I was just thinking that the CEO is close to midnight for him, and I was thinking, wow, this guy is on vacation in Portugal.
I think he's working there.
And I just realized that it's not vacation.
It's not vacation.
It would be too much coincidence if there are two folks from the company in Portugal on vacation and attending the workshop this late.
No, they have that passion, OCD.
Oh, they
Okay, that's awesome, guys. How's your time? You would like to eat something, or we can have another questions.
It's up to you. If there's one more, we can handle. We got one back here.
Okay.
Well, actually, there was two people that rose their hand. We'll do both, I guess.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Tainá. I have a question. I'd like to know how a product owner could incentivize the teams to work with clean code. Because sometimes I'm a product owner nowadays, and sometimes I need to work with a lot of requirements about the client. But sometimes I forgot that they need to have a good quality code.
Yes.
And I'd like to know how can I balance this? Is my question.
That's a great question, and you might want to repeat it.
Yeah, I will repeat it. But as a PO, how can we encourage the team to improve their code?
Yeah.
How to balance the things? Okay, it's the technical and the business.
But by the way, I want to say, first of all, as a PO, I admire you bringing it up because sometimes POs don't think about that, and they avoid that in general, and that's when the problems start to happen. So it's good to see a PO with that mindset, with that. And by the way, and if you get a hold of me once we finish here, I can probably email you. There was some work done recently, PhD work done here in Sao Paulo from a friend of mine. She just finished it talking about managing technical debt and talks about how to prioritize that. But mostly, and she's got some really good work that she did on that based upon even some work at some large companies here in Brazil and some other stuff. Graziella is her name, and I'll give you some contact information, at least afterwards. But the core thing here is, and what talks about, we don't clean up technical debt just to clean up technical debt. The product owner has to be focused on, as you know, what adds business value when we prioritize things based upon that. Sometimes product owners may not understand or see that some technical debt is hurting the business and keeping us from having business value. So, but I shouldn't just convince you if I'm the developer that, oh, we need to clean this or we can't do that. We really have to be able to measure and show where this is hurting and how it adds business value, and then we can prioritize managing that technical debt in there, because then the PO wants to do what's best, but they need to prioritize those tasks. So I always say that the QA, the developers, and the architects need to work closely with the PO, but also getting real data, analyzing and showing how this is keeping us from getting as many tasks done as we can, or how it's stopping us from adding business value. So you need to have real data to be able to show that. And in Grazi's thesis, she's got some ways of showing how you even, first of all, identify, but then how you have to measure it and equate it to, does it add business value? If the code's not changing, we shouldn't prioritize it, right? It doesn't make sense to do it. Whereas sometimes a developer may convince you, oh, it is important, but it's not, you know. But if it is changing a lot and it's causing a lot of pain, then it should be prioritized. And especially if you say as a PO, there's all these other tasks coming along that you're going to have on the backlog that are very similar like this, then it may make sense to make a task as part of that to deal with some of that technical debt. So it requires a collaboration. It's part of the agile principles of trust and transparency and being open.
and I shouldn't be afraid to show you and get all that stuff, and there's that trust relationship with that.
I'm with the right team here.
Okay.
We work together.
Okay.
And we try to do this kind of job, try to be together, to know about everyone, find ones, and what they can do for good and bad thing. I'm very happy to know that we are on a good way to work and think about this.
Yeah, definitely, and it's important because technical debt and other types of things can really hurt from sustaining the business value from that. But you don't want to get obsessed with it either, and we need real data. It's not like I feel like we should make the code better. I need to really show you where it's causing problems and how it adds business value. So equate it to that. So if you get a hold of me after, I can email you some stuff for that.
But you need to be, I mean, you probably know that sometimes you're the PO, you're good friends, you go for a beer with the devs, but sometimes you're not there yet, so you need to be careful. It's like you can't, oh, I'm going to have surgery. You walk in, there's a doctor walking in, you can't say, hey, doc, did you wash hands? So you can't do that, right?
Right.
So there's this. So, oh, hey, dear dev, so how's the technical debt?
Right.
Are you creating clean code? So there's
Right.
this kind of, you have to be kind of
That's
diplomacy in
that's
that kind of
right.
conversation. But I congratulate you on thinking about that in the first place, and I encourage you and all POs to even go beyond, because oftentimes POs are focused on the functionality and the user experience, right? UX and usability. Bring the question of what we call at the SCI, the quality attribute requirements. So ask the question, hey, what kind of scalability do we have for this kind of service or functionality? So bring up the requirements for scalability, for response time in an interaction. Do we want this to be a response time of up to 5 seconds or 1 second? So these other quality attributes are very important for driving the design. So when we think about what we want from the system, and oftentimes in scenarios, agile scenarios, the PO brings those statements, bring the quality questions as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And also, like Tom DeMarco with the myth of Slack, who he talks about with Slack, the problem with sometimes we try to get total efficiency. So as a PO, sometimes it's important to make sure to allow is not to get 100% efficiency, because if something goes wrong, you can't deal with it. So sometimes we try to get as many tasks in as we can, but then we can't build the quality in and deal with that. So it's more important to allow a little bit of slack. And in fact, that's a big problem. We can't improve, we can't innovate, try new ideas or any of that without allowing a little bit of that. Now back in the old days, Google used to have this thing that 1 day a week, you know, they would allow you to do whatever you want. So it was up to 20% of your time and that's where Gmail and a lot of other cool ideas came from. Most companies won't allow that, but even if you allow a little bit of slack time, we're not trying to get 100% of as many tasks in as we can. We want to have enough tasks where it's not, if you're running a marathon, you don't run full speed, right? If you sprint all the way, that's why I don't like the term sprint that gets used sometimes in our community, because you get tired. If you're running a marathon, you have to pace yourself. So you want to sustain your development, you want to sustain it for the long run, and you have to allow it so people don't get burned out and give some time. So buffering a little bit of time for that in there and asking the developers, is this realistic? Does that give you enough time to do everything you need to do, and asking these extra questions? Do you need a little bit of extra time? We don't have to have as many tasks in this sprint. I don't know what you're using, whether you're using Kanban or Scrum, 2-week sprints or 1 week sprint. Yeah. And so rather than trying to fill it up 100%, allowing at least, a few hours of time for them to do that can help as well.
Empowering people with this, where we can give the opportunity to try to open their minds. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's nice. I will do this.
Okay, cool. And then I think we had one last one.
Thank you. So again, it's another question about APIs. So when we start exposing APIs, very often we have to change something on its functionality.
Yes.
And the request payload just needs to get changed. But then we have a problem because not necessarily the old clients will be able to get the request working with it. And then I have read different articles of microservices that say that you can't create different versions of your API, but others that say that that's okay depending on how you do it. So I would like to know your opinion about it.
Okay, I will try to to repeat it. So how can we change the APIs that are already in a contract?
Right, and handle versioning or other things, or should we do that, and all that other type of stuff. And there's a lot of beliefs on that out there. I'll let Paulo start out with that, and maybe I'll add something. I don't know.
I did a master's program at Carnegie Mellon University, and right in the first semester, they told us, hey, for software engineering questions, there is a standard answer, which is, it depends.
Yeah. By the way, that's a typical consultant answer too.
Right, and here's the thing.
Because it really does.
So a few years ago, we had a reunion, a class reunion for that. Actually, everybody from all the years came for a reunion of that program, software engineering. And they gave away, there was a hat and a whistle, by the way, for coaches. And they gave away a sticker that I still have it here. I use it often in class. So if you can read, it's and up on top it says 25 years of, it depends, Carnegie Mellon University Software Engineering Institute. So the answer to that question is it depends. But we know changing an API is hard. So, and I don't know what kind of API. APIs are generic term. Let's think of like HTTP APIs that are visible to the public. It is hard. And that makes the API or the contract of your services something that you need to think carefully in their design. So you want to design that thing, you get it right in the first place. Because once you have that service up and running and people write code against your API, there are two issues. If you change the API, you can break the clients, and the other, as you mentioned, and the other issue is oftentimes you don't know who are the clients, right? And that is the reason why so many public APIs in the beginning, like 15 years ago, some public free APIs, you would just write code and call it. And now, oh, I want to use this free public API. It's going to ask you to register. So you're gonna ask you to create a key for your account, right? Even if it's free, you still have to register because they know, hey, if there's an issue, they can send an email. There's some sort of cover your assets kind of a statement there. But it is an issue. But depending on the scenario, you can change your whole API. And some organizations are doing it. They're creating a new version. And oftentimes you have the URL, and you have V2, and then it's a completely different API. And we are seeing this move, and this is one way to do it. You do it all across the board. You have the old version, and then you have a whole new API using a new standard for the data representation, using new URIs, different ways to do methods. A common kind of change that we are seeing in HTTP APIs these days is a move from, I'm not suggesting this, by the way, okay? The tech radar still says assess, which is, I'm talking about GraphQL. You may have heard of GraphQL. So some organizations, they have created their RESTful APIs, and now they're creating V2 or V3, which is GraphQL based. So it is something that you can do, but there's a high cost. It's the kind of software change that is expensive, and it needs to be done carefully. Now, I mentioned the API gateway, and that's a kind of tool that can help you to manage different requirements. So if you want a new API, but you want to keep the old service, you can kind of have clients talking to this new API, but this new API is actually sort of a facade because you're hitting the API gateway. The API gateway does the transformations necessary to hit the old service that has the old API in the back. So there are different possibilities there.
Yeah,
it depends.
It does depend, and just one thing I'll add to that, because I follow a lot more of what Paulo said, but I will say this, is a few years ago, 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago, I was in Poland at this event, and there were some top people from Salesforce there, and I got into this big debate with them because they have a lot of APIs, and then you look at Facebook and all the others. A lot of times they say that since they drive the market, they change, and now it's just up to all their clients to adapt to change with it. And so they don't worry, and they don't handle the history. I was arguing with them quite a bit, is that it depends, once again, on depending the types of clients you have and the support. Do you provide versions and backwards compatibility? Yeah. And so you have to look at that. Now, they're able to drive the market so much, kind of like the big bully type of thing, that their business decision was, hey, you just have to keep up with us, and that, you know, and these we're not going to worry about versioning and history and all that stuff. We're going to change it, and anybody that follows us, they're going to have to work hard and quickly and adapt to it. Now, it's not like they're chaos constantly changing, but occasionally for good business, whatever business reason they see, they make these changes. And I was arguing quite a bit with them with that, because I felt that it depends as well. But for some of those people, take that.
We're from a generation in which backwards compatibility is something sacred. It was, you had to keep it. Not anymore. That upsets me a lot. Not exactly with HTTP. I don't deal with many. I mean, I write services that expose HTTP API, but I don't call that many. It doesn't hurt me. But frameworks, calling libraries. Oftentimes I do an upgrade of a framework, dependency, and boom, it's not working anymore. And then, this class, we removed it. We didn't even deprecate it. It's removed. So, I'm going to move from Spring 4.5 to 5. All of a sudden this doesn't work. I'm going to move from Java 7 to Java 8. All of a sudden this way to deal with the collection doesn't work. So it's not something important anymore, apparently, which is sad, right? But that was a quick parenthesis.
But one thing I will actually defend them on is they usually publish the change way ahead of time and let people know that it's upcoming and things like that. So they do give at least their clients, and now that you're registering, they can at least kind of warn people from that. So it a lot depends, once again, on what kind of clients are using your API and what's going on with it. But anyway, so I will say thank you very much for having us participate in part of this. It's my pleasure to be here. Hopefully I'll be in Araraquara again sometime. I go back to Sampa tomorrow until the Carnival, anyway, a little bit after that. But I'll be working there too some, so not all fun. So, even though I love my work, so that's definitely fun too.
Okay. Guys, thank you very much for sharing the knowledge with us. We are very happy to have this kind of meetup. So sorry guys for don't answer all the questions, but thank you very much, Joey, Paulo. If you want to have some final words.
Well, thank you for coming. Thank you for staying this long. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here. I hope we get to meet again. You guys have my email address, Joe's as well, so feel free to send us emails with other information exchange in the future. And we'll be around tomorrow too.
That's right. And I'll be back, right?